Printing money is bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's inflationary.
Mm-hmm.
But borrowing printed money is insane.
What causes inflation? So I sell a thing, like a house or a car, for 10 times what I paid for it decades ago. It is still the same one house or same one car. If I
Correct.
replace it after I have sold it, I must pay more than I received. I must pay more than I received.
That's right.
How is it I have made a 90% profit on my
Gain, right?
sale?
And you've had to pay a tax on that gain. So, as you pointed out, so that $14,000 house from 1967 is a $350,000 house today. And did you make $320,000, $335,000? No, you didn't. But if it's an investment, you pay taxes on that $335,000 as though you earned it. So it is unfair to have a dollar that is so fluctuating that over time you get this type of imaginary gain. The caller is a writer is correct. If he now went to try to buy a comparable house, he'd have to pay that sort of money. It's not like he can buy another one for $14,000. So it's unfair to tax people on long-term capital gains without factoring in inflation. And then, of course, that's where they get that phony CPI number. So any type of a tax scheme that said, okay, you bought the house in 1967, and we've experienced 100% inflation since then, so you're allowed to deduct $30,000 or $28,000 from your gross. That still wouldn't account for the inflation that we've really seen over that period of time.
Sure.
So it is an unfair system of taxation. Taxing productivity instead of consumption is what put us in this place in the first place. So the combination of the Federal Reserve Act, which guaranteed the inflation of the currency unit, at the same time institute an income tax, it's just a guaranteed system of slavery. I don't know how else
Just
to
doesn't
describe
work.
it.
So, but you've never been a fan of a. Have you been a fan of a consumption like a value-added tax to do it all, and you don't pay any money until you buy stuff?
Oh yeah,
Is that okay? Would that be cool?
I would go for that if we eliminate the income tax.
But you think they'd ever do
and
that?
replace it with a consumption tax?
Oh, I'd love that too, man.
Yeah. Because you decide what you consume or don't consume.
Sure.
And the very rich consume so much more.
Yeah, they buy airplanes and boats and stuff.
Boats
and whatever.
All that stuff. Yeah,
They
exactly.
pay taxes.
So they were going to pay more tax naturally. But the argument is that the person who's just barely making ends meet ends up paying tax on all their consumption and doesn't get an earned income credit,
Sure.
and all of the wonderful tax treatment that's given on the income side. So it's my firm belief that by taxing income, that's direct capitation, taking it right off of what you make, right off of the top, it allows them to control inflation more succinctly. And I've often made the argument, and I'll make it again, that tax policy for revenue is obsolete. The idea of collecting an income tax in order to pay the bills is obsolete. Taxation, in fact, for revenue is obsolete. Government could simply create whatever money that it needs. So let's say, for example, we have a $14 trillion economy, and we say that our federal government is free to create $1.5 trillion a year and add it into circulation to pay for its operations. No income tax. That would necessarily mean that the money supply would increase by 10% each year, and the inflation rate would probably correspond, but you would never pay another dollar of income tax. So financing government spending through taxation is an obsolete concept. I would point to the paper written in 1946 by the president of the New York Fed on his way out. His name was Beardsley Rummel, R-U-M-L, and he wrote that exact piece, Taxation for Revenue is Obsolete. The idea that government should collect any of your money in order to pay its expenses is an outmoded concept. And unfortunately, it's geared towards an additional hidden tax that you never see until a lifetime has gone by.
And Andrew, you've even alerted us to a still standing Supreme Court decision that actually said when you trade your labor for dollars, it's not income.
Right. You're referring to the Pollock decision, 1894.
1894. Of course, why doesn't that work today?
Why doesn't it work today?
I guess you could fight it
Because
if
you're-
you wanted to go to court.
Because there's no one who's not in the forum. You see, this is the point. When the Supreme Court issued that ruling
Yeah.
in 1894, there was no income tax. There were no federal adhesion contracts. There was no Social Security. There was no zip code. There was no Federal Reserve System. And so there was no way that the District of Columbia could adhere itself to you or adhere you to them and force you into some sort of behavior. So it is only through the addition of these adhesion contracts, I mentioned a few, discharging your debt with Federal Reserve notes instead of paying them
Whoops.
with lawful money. That's one.
That's one.
The zip code creates a federal jurisdiction over the entire United States. You use a zip code, you're in the forum.
Whoops.
The the income tax is, of course, another, voluntary system, as they put it, that enables you to declare yourself to be within the forum. In 1894, there weren't many United States citizens. Now, I say that because anyone who was naturalized by the District of Columbia and conferred citizenship was not a citizen of Texas or a citizen of Virginia. They were a citizen of the United States, and so they were subject to their jurisdiction no matter where they went in the country. But a natural-born organic citizen from 1894 had no adhesion to the federal government at all. And they didn't have ATF and IRS agents, swarming through their towns without the knowledge of their sheriff. That's about who they had to worry about: the sheriff, the state police, the governor, and the people that make the laws in their state. And they were the ones that forwarded the money to Washington to pay for their operations, not the individual citizens. So we've gone a long way away from what the Constitution intended as a means of financing our operations.
So it wasn't until we got unknowingly in these little adhesion contracts that that Supreme Court decision doesn't mean squat.
Yes, that's right.
But if
because
isn't
you know
it-
what? The Supreme Court has also ruled that you have a right to free speech, right? You have a right to speak your mind.
Right.
But if you're a baseball player and you're on the diamond and you're speaking badly to the umpire, he's free to throw you out of the game. Now, you're just expressing your constitutional right to free speech. How come he can throw you out of the game? Why can't you sue him for violating your constitutional rights? Well, because you surrendered them when you joined the ball club. And that's the same thing with these adhesion contracts. You've traded your organic rights for civil rights, and so the rights you have are the one that government decides to give you as a 14th Amendment citizen. You're not an organic citizen anymore. And you take any American, line them up, 10 in a line, and say, okay, one at a time. Are you a U.S. citizen? That's your question. And you're going to go down the line, and all 10 of them, I bet, will say yes, I'm a U.S. citizen.
not
Well,
really,
okay,
right?
then you're subject. If they say
Oh,
they
yeah.
are.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Then you are.
And you're subject to the jurisdiction, then, of the federal district government. And I've had this argument with many lawyers, and I espouse the idea of state citizenship and states' rights, and by virtue of your state citizenship, you have all the rights of a federal citizen plus the rights given to you by the Constitution. And one particular lawyer said, he went right to the heart of the matter. He said, we settled all that after the Civil War. So after the federal government smashed down its jurisdictional hammer on the United States, the hierarchy of sovereignty is viewed as we, the citizens, on the bottom, and then the state government one height above us, and then the federal government, the supreme power of everything. That's not the hierarchy of sovereignty given to us by the Constitution. It is we, the people, at the top. We created the state governments. The state governments created the federal government, which is at the bottom. So it's been turned upside down, and we've all been convinced, yes.
Cattywampus for sure. But isn't a contract not really a contract if you don't really understand all the terms?
Constructive fraud, yes, it is. But
wait a minute,
in order
constructive fraud?
That's constructive fraud.
Well,
if
when
somebody,
we join the
if you
social-
signed a 2-page contract,
Right.
and then the next day they come out with a third page, oh, this was part of it too, and now you say, wait a minute, I didn't agree to that third page. Well, too bad. Your signature's on the contract. So what is your remedy at law? You can sue. That's what you would have to do. Fraud vitiates the most solemn contract. So if this type of fraud, in other words, if you've entered into an adhesion contract with the federal government that has terms that weren't revealed to you, then you can sue and allege that that fraud was committed in the inducement. In order to get you to sign the contract, they held out the third page. But that is your remedy. You must sue. You can't. If you don't, then you acquiesce, and that jurisdiction is assumed
Has anybody ever done
unless
that
it's challenged.
successfully?
Well, that's what gave us the Pollock decision. That's
Oh,
that's why it got to the
Well,
Supreme
wait a
Court.
minute. Though. I
Somebody
thought in
said,
the Pollock decision they didn't have any adhesions, so I lost you there.
well, they didn't, but the idea that the federal government was reaching into the states to take jurisdiction over something that was challenged by someone. And so, depending on which level of government you challenge and which, level of law you
Good
challenge.
luck with that, right?
Good luck, yeah. If it's a constitutional question, you'll have to go all the way to the Supreme Court.